It's America's pump gun. With over 11 million made, Remington 870s are everywhere. Our favorite place for an 870 is resting on our knee as we sit against a tree trunk in the turkey woods, but you will see them in duck blinds, cornfields, tree stands, police cruisers, military armories, pickup trucks, and in the rack at gun clubs. In short, anywhere someone needs a rugged, no-nonsense shotgun, an 870 is probably there. So today we bring you everything there's to know about this American classic. How the classic shotgun came to be. This year, the 870 turned 73 years old, and it's a perfect time to look back at a gun that shouldn't have been great, but turned out to be a classic. In the 1940s, Remington already had a great pump gun, the Model 31. Made of machined and hand-fitted parts, the gun was so smooth Remington marketed it as the ball-bearing repeater. It came in both an all-steel version and a lightweight alloy frame model, and many believe it was every bit as good as its main competition, the famous Winchester Model 12. But the Model 31's slick stroking action didn't come cheap. It took a total of 536 machining operations to make one, and World War II had shown gunmakers that reliable guns could be made through more economical manufacturing methods. As Remington engineers drew up the Model 31's replacement, they envisioned it as part of a family of shotguns and rifles that would lower production costs through the use of common parts, many of which would be stamped, not machined, to save even more time and money. The 870 could have been a cheapened shadow of the Model 31, but the Remington design team made a number of smart decisions that resulted in an all-new, great mass-produced shotgun. First, they based the 12-gauge 870 around the receiver of the 16-gauge 1148 semi-auto, assuring that the gun would be trim and light while cutting costs by using a shared part. They connected the slide to the bolt with twin-action bars in place of the single bar common to many pumps, reducing the possibility of twisting or binding the pumping stroke. They designed a trigger group that could be easily removed by popping out two pins, and a barrel that not only could be removed simply by unscrewing the mag cap, but was also completely interchangeable without fitting. The result was a gun that was light and lively, affordable, easy to take apart and maintain, reliable and versatile. With one gun and extra barrels, you could use the same 870 for long-range ducks and close-range quail. Finally, the 870's designers made sure the gun fit as many shooters as possible, stocking it with enough drop and a thin comb that let almost anyone get their face down on the gun easily. The new 870 debuted in 1950, replacing the Model 31. The 31 would come back 10 years later as the inspiration for the Mossberg 500, but that's a different story. The 870 came in two grades, a plain AP model and the deluxe checkered ADL, and they came with both a wooden and 3/4-pound steel Very-Weight plug that allowed you to add heft to the gun if you wanted to use it for waterfowl or target shooting. 1950s hunters and shooters celebrate the 870. Introduced in 12, 16, and 20 gauge from the start, as well as in trap and skeet grade, the 870 was an instant success. The trap version was first shown at the Grand American Handicap in the summer of 1950, and Rudy Etchen of Kansas used one of the new 870s to become the first shooter ever to break 100 straight trap doubles. While Etchen would earn the nickname Mr. 870 for his accomplishments at trap and skeet, and the new pump would become a gun club staple, the 870 made its name in the field, garnering a reputation as the gun that always worked. It was the bottom-of-the-boat duck gun that functioned no matter how cold or muddy the hunt, and it would go on to serve under harsh combat conditions in jungles and deserts as well. A 3-inch Magnum 12-gauge joined the lineup in 1955, followed by the Magnum 25 years later, and 870s have been offered in a model for nearly every conceivable application. One of the most important introductions occurred in 1987 when the Express model came out. A budget version of the 870, it had a hardwood stock in place of walnut and a lower level of polish inside and out, but in other ways it was identical to the original. An Express has been the first shotgun of countless shooters, and many of them have never seen any reason to shoot anything else. Millions of 870s have rolled out of the same factory in Ilion, New York, where they've always been made. The 870 passed the 10 million made mark in 2009, and it's the best-selling shotgun of all time. You'll find at least one in almost any gun cabinet. We currently have three, a 20-gauge Express and a pair of 3.5-inch 12-gauge Super Magnums. The 20 is stock, but the two 12s illustrate an advantage of 870's popularity. There are a ton of aftermarket parts available for them. All those improvements, plus a Cerakote finish, make it even more durable and reliable than it already was, which, for an 870, is saying something. It's certainly not saying anything new, though. Hunters and shooters relied on 870s for 70 years, and it hasn't let them down. Used Remington 870s to look for and some to avoid. Anytime you make 11 million plus of anything, there are bound to be some hits and misses. The following is a highly subjective list of 870s to seek out and to avoid. We have owned more than a few, shot a bunch more, and have our solid opinions. Remington 870s to avoid. Early 20 gauges. Early 20 gauge 870s were made by putting 20 gauge barrels on 12 gauge receivers. Look for guns with LW stamped on the frame if you want a scaled down lighter 20. All 16 gauges. All 16 gauge 870s are made on 12 gauge frames. Granted, that frame was originally borrowed from the 16 gauge 1148, but still, all you get is a gun that weighs the same as a 12 but only shoots 16 gauge shells. If you want a real scaled down 16 gauge pump, find an Ithaca 37. Expresses of a certain vintage. Sometime in the early 00s, 870 Express quality control slipped. The most common problem you see in those guns is fired shells sticking in poorly finished chambers, most often with inexpensive target loads. Many 870 Express owners have their guns' chambers polished or do it themselves with fine steel wool and an electric drill, and the malfunctions usually go away. Replacing the metal injection molded extractor can help too. Remington has ramped up QC efforts in the past few years, and the new Expresses are much better than those of 10 or so years ago. Remington 870s to look for. Special Field. In the 1980s, Remington introduced a straight grip 21-inch, some were 23-inch, barreled upland gun in 12 and 20 gauge called the Special Field. It made a great carrying gun for bird hunters who put a lot of miles on their boots. Some of the later ones had removable choke tubes, and we'd love to have one for turkey hunting. Competition Trap. One of the odder 870 variants was a single-shot trap gun that incorporated a gas system. Gas is bled from a port in the barrel pushed against a weight in the mega tube, lengthening the recoil pulses and turning it from a sharp kick to a shove. We got to shoot one once, and the sensation was odd because 870 trap guns usually let you know they're there. Not this gun, it shot as softly as an 1100. Super Slug. Currently in production, the Super Slug has a heavy rifled barrel pinned to its receiver for added rigidity, and it shoots slugs into groups as tiny as slug groups can be. The Sure Shot stock, a kind of modified pistol grip, is comfortable to hold and has a comb the correct height for scope use. 90s era Wingmaster. For our money, the sweet spot in 870 production, if you want a modern, versatile gun, was the early 90s. When Remington first added rem choke tubes in 1986, they beefed up the barrels, adding a bunch of weight to the guns. In 1992, they offered a slimmed-down light contour barrel that made the guns lively again. These early 90s guns are still made the way they used to make them, but you get choke tubes and the lighter barrel. The barrels are light and lively. The action started out slick and have only gotten slicker over all those years of use. These guns come in both 2 3/4 and Magnum versions. The barrels don't interchange between standard and Magnum receivers. The Magnums are getting a little harder to come by. If you see one, grab it. That's all for this video, folks. See you another time.